Welcome. We are so glad that you're here. My name is Glenn Lorenz.
I'm Larry Anderson.
And we're glad you're taking this class with us. We want you to be competent and understanding of all things Wesleyan by the time you're done with this. And so that's why we have Larry here teaching the class.
That's scary.
My role is to come in this classroom. My role is to kind of come in and talk with Larry about issues of Wesleyan theology that then you guys will be able to discuss in your forum. And so that's why you're seeing my face on this camera. I'm the chair of the Department of Ministry and Theology at Central Christian College of Kansas, and been here for about 2 years now, something like that. Coming from California and Arizona and Kentucky are the places that I have lived for at least more than 3-4 years. So that's who I am.
And I am very blessed to be able to work with Glenn in the Ministry and Theology Department. They let me teach, and I have been able to teach for about 15 years now. And this is just one more part of the adventure for me and for us as we attempt to help you in your ordination process by offering this class online. We just got back from Israel. We'll be traveling back there in 1,048 days, which is 3 years. Yes, I'm neurotic. And if you'd like to be a part of that adventure in 2016, the month of January, we'd love to have you come. Start saving your pennies, okay? But that's not the purpose of what we're doing here today. We're going to begin talking about the things that you'll be doing this week. Throw out a couple of talking points. Glenn and I may have opportunity to dialogue here. We may not. We'll see how much time we have. But this week and next week, you're going to be looking primarily at background material as it relates to Wesley. Some of it will overlap, complement. Some of it will actually maybe even bring some conflict and tension as we have some different views from different individuals. You're looking at YouTube videos. Next week's YouTube video is very interesting because it's not about Wesley at all. It's about Hogarth's paintings. That will be an interesting part of the conversation. I think you'll enjoy that video. But we're going to focus on background for these 2 weeks as we also begin to think about some of Wesley's methods. Next week we'll be dealing primarily with class meetings and then some other issues. But today I just want us to begin thinking about some of the things that are in the reading, especially Dr. Donald Drew's article that deals with a lot of the background information. And Howard Snyder's first 2 chapters that we're reading this week. There's a couple of things that are, at least in my mind, are important for us to give some thought to. And that is the question, how does culture or the social conditions that we see in Wesley's day, how can and do they impact the church? And how does that translate into our own day and time? Some of the social and cultural issues. And some of those things, of course, for Wesley, as Donald Drew points out, issues such as the widening gap between the rich and the poor, alcoholism, gin production and its consumption, the idea of quote-unquote entertainment, which included all sorts of just really very disturbing things. And one of which reminds me of modern-day cage fighting. Bare-knuckle fighting was a hugely entertaining sport in the 18th century, and now here we are, cage fighting. How do we in the church address those kinds of issues? Do we ignore them? Do we say, well, that's just the way the culture is? Or do we measure the impact on the people who are parts of our congregation? How do we address that in the modern culture? Wesley was pretty insistent that some of those things were things we needed to address. And so those are some of the issues that we're going to be talking about. So how does culture impact the church then, and how does it impact the church today, and how should we respond? Any thoughts on that? I'm kind of catching you off guard.
I'm thinking about the Hunger Games. Is what I'm thinking about when you talk about the kind of extreme violent tendency of the 1700s England. So I don't know.
And I wonder, did people just become numb to the violence and participate without giving thought? I get a sense that that sort of happens to us today. So we watch the news and we see all the violence and we say, well, that's just how our culture is. I was at the cage fights last week and, I was cheering on my champion. No, I wasn't. But
okay.
No.
Well, you kind of caught me off guard. I thought that maybe you had gone there.
No. We have a person on campus who actually, he's not a faculty, he's a student. He does cage fighting.
So, I mean, should the church take a stand against that kind of violent entertainment is the question. Wesley said yes. And we have a student who cage fights.
Yeah.
So is that a failure on our part? Or is that, he doesn't cage fight anymore, so I don't know. But maybe he does. I don't know.
I'm not sure. He got seriously injured, so he wasn't even able to work for
And some of you are
3
probably
months.
saying, what's wrong with cage fighting?
Yeah.
Right? And I don't know that there is anything, but I think Wesley probably would have suggested there was.
And I think he would have suggested not because of the fighting itself necessarily, but the consequences of the fighting. Because you've got gambling involved, you've got families that are impacted, you've got this piece where people do become sort of numb to violence in general. And so the fighting itself may not be the issue. It's all of the pieces, the residual effects that Wesley had to pick up the pieces. I mean, even I got the sense, and I think it was from Donald Drew's articles or comments, that Wesley wasn't so much opposed to drinking alcohol as he was to the production of it to the point of harm to society. The drunkenness and the fact that people didn't have money to take care of their children. The fact that children were drinking. Alcoholism went from, the very wealthy to the dirt poor and not having food for your children, So those residual effects. And those were the pieces that I think Wesley tried to pick up. Yeah. So what kind of an example is Wesley providing for us to deal with those social issues? And what kind of response do we have when we look at our culture? And cage fighting is just one example. Is the church making statements? Because that's just entertainment. And entertainment is so important in our culture.
I'm often struck by people in the church that say things like, I went to that movie because it was rated R, but it was only for violence.
Yeah. And maybe that's what I'm talking about. We get numb to it. Yeah. And so then does it trickle down into the ways I treat my wife or the ways I treat my children or even the ways I look at people? Do I care about people in Damascus who are getting wounded in the civil conflict? So do I just get numb? And
then what's the church's response to those kinds of social ills?
Yes.
Wesley was very much a proponent of the church's involvement in curing those.
Yes. And so, and I like what Drew said at the end of his article, the last couple of pages where he talks about the long term effects of the Wesleyan revival and the biblical societies, the missionary societies, the prison reform, the abolitionist movement, all of those things. He didn't necessarily see the end result, but those were the end results. And they were prompted by his ongoing crusade that righteousness also has social implications. So it's just a challenge for me in our culture because I see many of the same kinds of issues. So what's my response as a Christian and sometimes leader in the church? So these are some of the issues that we're going to have opportunity to further unpack in our threaded discussion. So hopefully this whets your appetite and gets the old gray cells cooking, because this is the way we're going to be going. Okay.
Yep. And if you have questions or comments, administratively speaking, you can send those to me and or to Jackie, who you've already been in contact with, and we can take care of administrative stuff. Of course, you can talk to Larry about it too, and Larry will bring those things to our attention. But we want to make ourselves available to you so that you have as good of an experience in this class and you learn as much as you can in these 10 weeks. So thank you.
And then one final thing, please call me by my first name. I prefer that, and that's Larry. Okay? Thank you.